Today I'm sewing McCall's 6876 bell bottoms for our Barbie dolls. This pattern only has 3 pieces, as you can see here. And we have 1 dart in the front and a waistband. Let's get started. First, we're going to sew our darts. So once you've marked them, and as I stated in another video of mine, I always cut out the dart and then trace it. It's so much easier that way. So this is my wrong side. This is my right side. So I'm going to go ahead and just pin my dart on the wrong side of the pattern and then sew that in an angle from needle to end point of the dart. Now, if you can see the placement of my fabric and how I just sewed down that dart, what I do is I angle the fabric so that the needle will end right at the end of the dart. It makes it much easier to sew a nice dart. So now you're going to press that towards the back. Now that it's nicely pressed, we're going to put right sides of the front pieces together and sew the front center seam. From waist to here, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm pretty good at knowing where a 1/4 inch is on my machine. What I suggest for you, if you're not sure, is to measure from your needle. Usually your presser foot has a marker right in the middle, and you can measure to just where your 1/4 inch mark will be. Follow your curve slowly. And there's your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we have the front piece sewn together. So let's give it a good press to press this over to the right facing you. And then we're going to top stitch 1 all the way down to where we just sewed on the back. And here I have my needle just over the seam line. As you get closer to that middle part where the fabric is overlapping, you're going to gently pull it apart. You can release your presser foot to release some tension there and release some of that fabric so it doesn't get caught up under your needle. And that just gives you a nice little detail for the front of your jeans. You can also do a second one if you wish, and if you wish you can also do that little J formation or that detail, that stitching detail that you have in the front of jeans, but I think I'm going to leave mine like this. Our next step is to sew the back legs to your front. So we're going to take one back piece, right side to right side, pin it and sew it. I've got both of my edges pinned, so I'm going to sew using a 1/4 inch stitch. Now that we've got our back legs sewn to our front legs, I went ahead and pressed all of my seams. So the back leg seams are facing the back legs. Now what I'm going to do, this isn't part of the instructions for the pattern, but what I like to add is top stitching right along that seam line. So I'm going to do that to both sides of my pants before I continue sewing. All right, so I've got my needle positioned just over that seam line that we just sewed. And I'll show you what that looks like. And I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but see that top stitching there? It makes the jeans look more authentic. And I think it gives it a nice little touch. And I'll do the same on the other side. Again, positioning my needle just right next to that seam line and slightly stretching my fabric. And that's what it looks like. Adds a pretty little touch. Now that we've got our top stitching done, I went ahead and trimmed away all of the threads that were left over. And what I'm going to do with my dart threads, I'm going to put a couple of knots in them and then cut those shorter, just so that they're out of the way. Now let's go ahead and work with the hem. I'm going to show you a little trick that works with a longer hem, your own garments, any kind of hem. This is a great little trick. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my needle up to the longest stitch, and I'm going to baste at my fold line. My fold line with these pants is going to be 1/4 inch. So I've got that basted, and a really easy way to do this is now right at that basting stitch, I'm going to fold up my hemline and press it. You can also finish your hem by zigzagging or using a serger if you'd like. For this project, I'm just going to use fray check, which helps the fabric to keep the fabric from fraying. So there I've got my hem pressed up. And I'm going to put another basting stitch right at the edge of my raw edge. So see, now I've got that basted in place. Now what I'm going to do is do the same thing to the other side before I stitch my hem in place with my regular stitch length. Now that we've got our hem basted, we're going to use a regular stitch length and go right over our basted stitch. And let's do it one more time to give the jeans a nice authentic look. So you're going to put your needle at about 1/8 right next to that stitch line that you just put in, and stitch again, just following that line. Now you can carefully remove your basting stitch without removing the stitching you just put in, and get rid of your extra threads. The reason why we do it like this flat construction, makes it so much easier to do the hemming and such before we hem the legs, stitch the legs together, because otherwise you're dealing with a very small space. I really love flat construction. Now we have a nice clean finished edge for our hem. I went ahead and pressed it, and it looks really nice and crisp. So moving along, we're going to do the waistband next. Now this piece was cut out on the fold, and there's a little notch here, so I cut that into my fabric. The next step here is we are going to finish the long edge here, which is the unnotched side. So we can do that by serging it or by putting in a zigzag. I'm going to go ahead and do a zigzag, and once I finish that, I will pin it, the notch side, the side with this notch, sorry about the camera moving, I'll pin that to the waistband. So I finished that edge for the waistband. Now I'm going to pin both edges across. Well, what I mean is I pin it here at the raw end, and then I pin it at the other raw end. And then if you need to stretch this piece a little bit, what you can also do is just clip the fabric a little bit so that it fits your waistband. And when you're clipping, just make sure you're not going in too deep, but you're just putting a series of little clips in there so that it stretches, but it's not going to go to, when you stitch it, it's not going to go through that stitch line. That's what you don't want. Sometimes you have to clip the curves for the fabric to fit. See that? And then it stretches a little bit. I hope you can see that. It stretches a little bit so that you can fit that fabric right there. So let's just continue pinning that. And then when you sew that, you're gonna again use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, so now it's all pinned. We're going to use a 1/4 inch and sew it across. Using your regular stitch, if you zigzagged, remember to put it back on your regular stitch. We're going to go ahead and just sew that down. Keep your raw edges even. And on little pieces like this, I like to put my finger right before it, just to make sure that I'm not putting any puckers into the fabric. So I stretch it slightly as I sew. And that's why I put a lot of pins in it as well. So there it is, sewn across. Check the back, looks good. Let me make sure by pulling up the front that I didn't put any unwanted puckers, and it looks like I didn't. Great. So now I'm going to press this up with my iron. Now, usually what I do with waistbands is I press it up before I fold it over. For some reason, to me, it just makes it easier to fold over. And it gives it a nice crisp fold. So we're going to press it up. And when we fold it over, we're going to press it again before we stitch it down. Okay. So now that we have it pressed up, we're just simply going to press it over right at that seam line. And I'm going to hold it down a bit with some pins. So right at your seam line, you can just go ahead and press it over, hold it down with the pin, and then press it with your iron. Then the next step will be to take it to the sewing machine and sew a line right at that edge. Now I'm going to remove this one because I don't want that pin head to melt. All right, there we go. Give it a good press. Now press this edge. Then press this before I take it to the sewing machine. Now I'm right at the edge of my waistband is where I have my needle. Making sure all the threads in the back are going to the back and neck so they don't get caught under my needle. All right. And I don't know if you can see, but where that little notch is, I just keep my fabric right up at that edge. And there, your waistband is top stitched. Now, let's get rid of these threads. And then we're going to sew from about here. There's a dot on your pattern. So I will mark that dot, and what we're going to do is sew from about here straight to this end. Just that. What I like to do here is backstitch as well. So let me clean this up and I'll come back and sew that piece together. All right. So I went ahead and poked a hole in here so that I can mark my pattern piece. And I just need to do one side. Now, because we sewed it down, we're going to have a difference from the waistband edge to here. And as you can see with the pattern piece, it's right exactly on the fold line, and that's a 1/4 inch right there. So we'll match this edge to the pattern piece, and that's where we're going to put our dot. So I'll just mark it with some chalk. There it is. I'll make sure my pattern pieces are matching and sew from that edge. All right, so I'm going to start right at that dot. I'm going to back stitch a couple of times and then take it down to this edge. So I want to put my needle right on that dot. Make sure my fabric is lined up. There we go. All right, so back stitch, forward stitch. Now you want to pivot your fabric because you want to keep it right within that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And follow the curve. There you go. Just like that. So I'm going to get rid of this thread. And now, let me show you what we're going to do next. So now, you should have this, right? Now, you're going to open up your pants and you're going to match up these two seams here, your crotch seams, and you're going to match up your seam allowances. So I'm just going to pin it right there in the middle. And then I'm going to pin this leg and then the other leg. Now that you've got your legs pinned, we are going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and stitch that right down. Now, you can also finish that edge. I hope my video is not too dark, but you can go ahead and finish that edge. You can serge it or zigzag it or put a freight check on it, and you are almost done. Let's remove those threads, clean it up, and then we'll turn it inside out. All right, and here they are on my Barbie doll. Maybe I shouldn't have pressed that so flat, but there go the pants. You can see the waistband. Now the only thing I need to do is add either Velcro or one of those snaps on the back. So that's all I have to do there. And it's a pretty good fit. And she's got sneakers on. And she's standing flat. So the bells kind of cover her feet. And there you go. We could even probably take them in a little bit. Just a teeny bit to give it a tighter fit along the hips. It's a teeny bit loose. But I think it's really good. And I'm wondering, we could even sew maybe some outside pockets, like a patch pocket. So, what do you think? Will you try this pattern? I bought this pattern on Etsy and I downloaded it. And I think it's really cute. It's got some pieces in there that I'd like to sew. Oops. And I'd like to sew that skirt, that top, that skirt, and maybe just for fun do something fancy like this and try that bubble thing. And definitely this one we could still use. So all right, those are the pants. Thanks so much for watching. If you like it, please subscribe and click like on the video, and I will be sewing up some more projects for sure to show you. Thank you so much.